I'm going to talk about this topic of think big, go small, and how that's worked for us over at AJ Bell, how we've grown UX. So just a little bit about AJ Bell. We're a FTSE 250 company, and we basically help people invest. We've got two very distinct distribution channels. So we have a D2C market, where we have two products, and we also have an advised channel. So we work with financial advisors, and we basically provide investment platforms for these guys. It's a really interesting area, two very distinct channels in terms of our users. And let's get cracking, because we've not got long, and you guys have been here for a while already. So we're going to skip the first trilogy sort of thing. This was really more a case of I've spent 25 years in design, nearly 14 years now in UX, and I've really seen our profession changed. I've been very lucky. UX as a discipline has radically changed. The landscape changed. The perception of what we do has changed. I feel very lucky to have been a real part of that. And so it's great to be able to share my experiences with other people and other designers as well, which is great. So let's jump into sort of episode 4, I guess. So nearly 4.5 years ago, a little bit more than that now, I joined AJ Bell as their first UX designer in Manchester. And just for a bit of context, really, I'd just taken redundancy. I'd worked in a UX team for a company that created patient administration systems for the NHS. And to be honest, I'd had a rotten 4 years. I'd literally banged my head against the wall. We worked with 22 siloed teams that had no real understanding of what UX was. And yeah, banged my head against the brick wall. I was in a pretty despondent place, I must admit. And if anything, I was sort of jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire, because back in 2018, AJ Bell were very much in the dark ages. I was actually the first, as I say, UX designer in our head office. There was no resource. The perception of UX was that I was just going to come in and make everything look pretty, which obviously that's not the case. I was pretty determined not to make the same mistakes. I had a real belief in the function of design and how we could go about changing mindsets and the understanding of what UX could deliver. And around this time, I attended a playbook course by Jared Spool. It was a bit of a seminal moment for me, actually, because, as I say, I was coming off the back of a job where I'd failed, and actually that course provided me with almost the proof of my design beliefs. Everything that I'm going to talk about, I actually tried to apply at that other place, but it didn't work. But it really allowed me to sort of establish a sort of framework and foundation. And now, you know, this is where we stand with UX at AJ Bell. We are embedded. We are a centralized, recognized function within the business. We have specific design resources across both distribution channels, across all 4 products that we have, plus an additional area of the business in terms of our operational and regulatory needs. So that's servicing designs for our own staff within the building. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we've gone from that dark ages all the way through to that sort of embedded design. And we've done it by this idea of thinking big and then going small. So what do I mean by think big? For me, and going back to one of Jared Spool's thoughts, is that he argued a while ago, and it sort of hit the internet with designers, depending on what side of the fence that you're on. He talked about how design was simply the rendering of intent. And I actually love this. I think it's simple and I think it's powerful. I've been a designer for virtually all my life. And it's the first time when I heard it a few years ago that actually really resonated with me. And that idea of the rendering intent, it alludes that everyone's a designer. And I do believe that this is the cornerstone of everything, the big foundation block on which we've built everything from. And my team, if you wish, we're the official designers. We've got designer in our job titles and all that, but we see everyone else in the business, and we're now over 1,200 staff, as unofficial designers. Everyone is welcome in our design process and what we're getting involved in. I actually have come to believe that it's a myth that it's always the designers that come up with the idea, with good ideas. I think actually everyone's capable of getting involved in the design process and coming up with ideas. It's actually for us as designers to foster and create environments in which these little ideas can come to light. So this belief, if you wish, my foundation, this is how I frame my sort of big idea around. And then I want to, in order to define success, if you wish, we need to define success, because that's critical to how we know when we're successful. So taking that foundation step, what was the vision? And my think big idea was this. I was 4 or 5 months into my role. I was a solo designer. There was 800 people in the business at the time. And I come along and in myself thought, I'm going to centralize UX across the business. This idea scared me and excited me in equal measure. And that's how I sort of knew it was big enough. At the time, there was multiple dev teams. I'm one designer servicing 3 or 4 different dev teams. There was really established ways of working. So this idea of centralizing UX, not only was it a big idea, but it was out of my reach. It was out of my control. It wasn't even my remit. It was a real outrageous ambition. Might say too ambitious, but looking back on the success that we've had, I'm a firm believer in that you've really got to push it out there and almost scare yourself a little bit in terms of that thinking big idea. So how do we take this and work it through? This was a plan that I put together around 3.5, 4 years ago now. This is the inside of my head. It's like a working Pixar movie. All these things are moving about all over the place. And this was me coming into AJ Bell, dropping UX wisdom bombs on all our senior stakeholders, getting them to understand actually what UX was. And there was a map of me introducing a community of practice within the business, design thinking workshops, how we could work with development, how we could think about building design systems across the business and across the products. Even me talking in conferences and what we do in the outside world, and indeed how I'd build a team. And what I was after here was getting to this point, the nth degree, if you wish. This was where sort of that we would have that sort of centralized feel across products. Now, at the time, sort of 4 years ago, we only had 2 products. We've now got 4, and obviously we've got the ops and regs one. So this has become expanded over time. And the big thing about all this as well is that no one was expecting COVID to come along. So sometimes making plans, they don't always go the way that you want them to go. But I think if you push yourself and put it out there, at least you've got some sort of roadmap in which you can sort of follow and push yourself towards. So there was our vision. We got some buy-in from our senior stakeholders in terms of how we were going to push this and really crack on with it. So how did we put this into play? I'm a firm believer in that there are 3 jobs of design. And again, if we take that really big idea of the rendering of intent and then the big vision of centralizing UX, I know that I can break that down into these 3 big jobs. First job, to integrate, then to transform and to evolve. And you know, you really need to build upon these things. You can't just jump into number 2 or to number 3. It takes a lot of patience and effort to sort of work your way through all these. And if you do it right, then real great things can happen. The interesting thing about all these jobs are that my team, which we've now got 6 designers from me, just me on my own, is now 6 of us. Everyone understands what these mean and why. And part of my job is challenging my team to create their own blueprints within each of these jobs. So this is where the big starts getting broken down into the small. So what I'm going to share with you now is a couple of slides that members of my team have created for themselves. So this one's from a member of my team, Amy, who's actually a UX apprentice. She's doing a degree at Manchester Met alongside sort of working for us, AJ Bell. She works in the ops and reg space, and this was her little blueprint for how she was going to integrate into the teams. She's got sort of 3 big bubbles of activity around showcasing, education, and networking. And then within them bubbles, she started breaking it down into smaller pieces of things that she wants to get better at and focus on. But by doing that, she understands the bigger picture. She understands why she needs to integrate and how that will work into the big picture. But this obviously gives her the scope then to really explore different areas. If we just take workshops as an area, well, there's a whole host of things that we could get involved in that, different ways of doing things. We're always trying to mix up our design thinking workshops. One of my team recently has been implementing the idea of Scamper as we go through and we talk with our product teams. So all these little things are stuff that can be broken down even further, and then it's up to myself and each member of my team to get better at these things as they go. Another example, this is for the second job of design, transform. How do we transform an experience? Again, this is from one of my guys who's been with me 4 years now. And she's put research at the very heart of how we transform an experience. I really like this, this idea that we need to constantly identify, understand, and improve. And by looking at these, again, 3 bubbles of activity that she's got going on in terms of insights, in terms of mapping, and then prioritizing opportunities, she can break these down. So we could go into, our insights and usability. That's our feedback tool. We can look at the very small, specific things that go into making a campaign better. How are we asking the questions that we're asking? How can we get more engagement with people on that front? Or within mapping, one of my big things that I'm really interested in is Kano modeling and understanding basic expectations of users and how we can start identifying them things. But by putting them in bubbles of activity, we're able to break it all down. So we've gone from really solid foundations and big ideas to our 3 jobs of design, and now we're breaking them jobs down into smaller chunks, which cover an awful lot. And I want my team to sort of create their own blueprints for this and get attracted to the things that really sort of interest them. So we can, if we get better at the small stuff, we can constantly improve, because I honestly believe that small is beautiful. I think fantastic things happen when we concentrate on the small things. And it's very easy for me to say about trusting the process because I've been doing this a long time. But a lot of my team are made up of junior designers. So it's great to see them, how they focus, and we do a lot of reflection in terms of the seemingly small steps that we're taking, what a big change that can impact little by little. And it's also beautiful because we are going to hit bumps in the road without a shadow of a doubt. The challenges that we face today as a team are not the challenges that we faced 6 months ago. But that shouldn't mean that the bad day should put us off. But small's okay if we do have a bad day, because you can look back, you can take stock. And a lot of what we do with the team and my guys is looking at this, right? And looking at the challenge that we're faced with what could be today, and then look at the challenges we were faced with 6 months, 12, 18 months ago, when it would seem that we were perhaps down here, and look what we've achieved. So by focusing on small things, it feels better as well when things don't go according to plan, because they won't go according to plan. I think there's also a counter argument that sometimes it can feel like you're going in circles when you keep things small. But actually, I think you can change the lens on this. This is what's actually happening. We're constantly making progress. If you're keeping things small, you are always making progress. And this is where, for me, as a sort of head of a team, small's not only beautiful, but small is actually really powerful. Because if each member of my team is focusing upon the small aspects of their blueprint that lay into a larger job, then small becomes really powerful, and we can really make changes that are, well, almost super powered. And we can be the heroes as designers. We can absolutely be the heroes, and the change that we've made at AJ Bell in the last 4.5 years is testament to that. We focus on the small, we can affect powerful change. And I'm going to share with you now what I think are my 3 superpowers, except they're not superpowers at all. These are learned skills, but I think that each one of them, if you can apply some time and understand each one of them and how it impacts the small things that you do, that you can make absolutely massive change. So the first one is patience. And I know this might sound a little bit boring. I am not a naturally patient person, or I never thought of myself as one. I'm a little bit like the weather. I come breezing in. I want to affect change. I want to get the passion up. But it was a post on LinkedIn actually that really interested me, and it was a very eloquent post from a guy who was arguing that patience was a weakness, and I found myself really disagreeing with him. And one of the comments in the post was actually this: it was the definition of patience, the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, problems, or suffering without becoming annoyed and anxious. I thought this was really interesting because that's absolutely what I do. When we speak to our product owners and our product managers, we're trying to get them to plant the flag in the sand, and then we will patiently move towards that flag. What the guy was actually arguing about in his post was that being passive was a weakness, that waiting was a weakness. Actually, if you passively wait for something, that's just laziness. That's not patience. So patience actually is a mindset. And if you can sow the seeds and you can have this capacity, then it will stop. And I've had to practice this. Like I say, it is a learned skill. I used to get frustrated when we hit bumps in the road, but now I've come to not go any less in terms of passion, but certainly in terms of emotion. So it's definitely something that you can practice, and also it falls into this idea of focusing on the small, because if you focus on what you can control rather than what you can't control, then you will deliver yourself more patience. My second superpower is this idea of flipping the coin, and we talk about this a lot across my team. Really, it's a posh way of saying how do we reframe something and any challenges that we might have. Love this quote. It's a great book. Another one there to have a look at or put on your Christmas list. I honestly believe that any challenge is an opportunity. And that can go back to the idea of job one of design integration, engaging with people, the ability to be able to practice empathy. This really is a way of taking a situation that's in front of you and just turning the lens a little bit. And if you can do that, and again, this is a skill that you can practice, and it's become something that we really focus on and become good at, because the opportunities are there. My final superpower is this idea around making mistakes. I've got a little search down there around that you can do around Sir Ken Robinson, a great TED talk on do schools kill creativity. I'm only going to touch a little bit upon it, but it's a really fabulous video, I think to watch. In it, he talks about a little girl at primary school, and the teacher goes to her. This little girl's never really been engaged in any lessons before, but they've got a drawing class, and the teacher wants to know why she's so engaged. So she goes up to the little girl and she says, "What are you drawing?" And the little girl tells her that she's drawing a picture of God. And the teacher says to her, "Well, nobody knows what God looks like. And the little girl replied to her, well, they will in a minute. And the great thing about that beautiful story is that kids were not frightened of making mistakes. It is another fabulous artist, Picasso, who constantly said every child is an artist. The problem is that they then grow up. And this idea of mistakes and us as designers, I think, is really interesting, because then as we go through school and as we start our working life, we're actually taught that mistakes are bad. If you fail an exam, you've made a mistake. I want to encourage people to make mistakes, especially designers. We've got to make mistakes to be creative. They say good decisions come from just great experience, and that is true. But I myself have made lots of mistakes. In fact, I understand that I am successful because of the mistakes that I have made. And a little bit like this guy, although I'd obviously completely different sort of subject matters, but I get what he's getting at here. This idea that he has failed over and over again, and that is why he succeeds. And I really buy into that in a lot of my career in UX, and trying to push understanding of UX into different areas. I have without a doubt made more mistakes and had more failures, but they are why I succeed. So some takeaways for you. If your big doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. I absolutely believe that. You don't need to know how you're going to get there. What you need to do is set yourself your own foundations of truth, things that are unmovable and that you truly believe in. And then you break all that down into bubbles of activity, and then you break it down into even further bubbles. And if you can concentrate on those small things, the bigger thing will take care of itself. And then the final one, hone your superpowers. Those 3 things that I've shared with you are 3 learned skills that have absolutely helped me in my career, and certainly in the last 4.5 years, take UX from the dark ages through to embedded design. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a really interesting example there, and kind of food for thought with a lot of the comments. And Hemkaran is also, he's agreeing here, saying he loved your journey and storytelling skills. He's entering a similar work environment soon, and you've empowered him with your words. So
fabulous. That's great. That's great to hear.
Some great feedback. Yeah, I really loved it. And if anybody has any questions, as always, please do send them in. We're monitoring the different chat platforms. One thing that just jumped out to me, and if I guess, did you share that initial, your big vision picture with people? Because if somebody shared that with me, I'd be very scared.
I did, absolutely. I went to the MD with it. I went straight to the MD with it, because I'd come from, like I said, that's why I sort of provided that context about where I'd come from, about having failed. And part of that failure was that there was almost a glass ceiling, if you wish. We couldn't get to the right people. So when I joined AJ Bell, I made a beeline for the managing director, basically, and I wanted to have an open chat with him, because I knew he was of the opinion that, like, I was there to, make things look good almost, and I wanted to make sure that he knew that's not only the only thing I was going to do. So yes, I did go with it. Go to him with that, and to other senior stakeholders. They might have thought I was a little bit crazy, and I completely get that. It's just the way that I was able to sort of express what I was thinking in my head. And as I say, it may not have gone completely to plan as you sort of saw it, but the big objectives of what were behind it, we've absolutely succeeded with. So that's great.
Brilliant. Great that people bought into it as well, so they were able to support absolutely. You. And you mentioned about, like, don't let a bad day kind of get you down. Do you have any examples that can kind of hammer that home of where you started at, where you thought things might have been going bad, but then, like, what you've actually achieved? What outcomes have you achieved in all of these changes?
A real great one at the moment would be on the advice side of things. We now do an awful lot of what we call advisor sessions. So we work through product through a design process, and when we're at a point where we're starting to prototype stuff and really put some sort of things together, we'll have what we call advisor sessions, where we invite advisor firms to come on and click about and comment and all things like that. Now, 2 years ago, I asked that question to that very same MD that I shared my vision with, and he sort of laughed me out of his office and sort of said, "Lee, we know what they want," sort of thing. And I sort of said to him, "Well, let me prove that you perhaps don't." And he was quite honest. He didn't think that they would work. Now, 2 years down the line, we're doing these things on a weekly basis, right? But the challenge is now. So that's a massive change in mindset. We've now got the head of product for our invest center. It's part and parcel of what he says to his team. Have we done an advisor session on that yet? What do we know from the advisor? Now that's a complete mindset change, right? So some of the problems perhaps some of the guys have got at the moment is, how do we get better at them sessions? And I think one of the big ones that we have is we obviously invite product team, we invite the BAs, and we do invite developers to come along and sit and watch these sessions, because there's nothing so enlightening as sort of really understanding the context behind stuff. I think the big challenge that we've got at the moment is really getting the buy-in from the devs to come along with that. So that shows you the shift, I guess. 2 years ago, didn't do anything like this. Now, yeah, we do a lot of it, but there are still challenges within that to keep getting better.
Great. Well, I'd say keep going. One of the things that we've experienced, because at UXDX we have product, UX design, and dev, and
Right.
all the devs I talk to, I'm kind of asking them about how they're enjoying the dev sessions we do, and they're like, no, not interested. I want to know about the UX stuff. I want to know about the design. So I think there is a shift happening in the industry.
Definitely.
Great. I think that's all the questions that we've had come through, but so I'll just finish up by thanking you for sharing. I really enjoyed that session, and thank you for sharing all your knowledge.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.